When I was 18, my cousin Jade accused me of something horrible, and my family turned against me, stripping away my college savings. Years later, as she faces a terminal illness, the truth has finally come out. But instead of apologizing, my family still expects me to keep quiet. Jade, who's 4 years older, was once close to me, but over time we grew apart. She's my uncle's daughter, my mom's younger brother, and he raised her alone. He'd gotten married young after getting his ex pregnant, but the marriage fell apart when she cheated. Jade's mom tried to stay involved for a while, but eventually she moved away with a new partner, and they haven't spoken since. My uncle is a well-respected man, always shouldering life's challenges alone. He stayed single, dedicating his life to raising Jade without ever remarrying. He saved diligently to set up a college fund for her, but when she wanted to continue her studies further, he told her he couldn't finance it anymore and needed to save for his own retirement. I thought this was a fair stance since Jade was old enough to work and support her education, but she saw it differently and argued that he should continue covering her expenses. Because of these disagreements, she spent a lot of time at our house venting to my mother. I stayed out of it, thinking it wasn't my place to speak up. One day, Jade showed up unannounced while my parents were out, as she often did. I told her my mom wasn't home, expecting her to leave, but she decided to stay. After another argument with her dad, she wanted some space. She started ranting at me about the same issues she always screamed about to my mother, but I'd heard it all before. I interrupted her, telling her that my uncle was being perfectly reasonable. I said her dad had spent his life preparing her to be independent, and now was the time to show it. If she wanted to pursue a higher degree, she'd need to work like everyone else. She had a STEM background, so she could easily land a job to support herself. She argued it was too difficult, but I told her she had two options: either pay for her own education or quit. It was unfair to keep burdening her dad when he'd already given her so much. Instead of being thankful, she acted like he was some villain. She lost it when I said this, calling me a spoiled brat who would never understand her struggle. Truthfully, I thought she was more spoiled than me, but I didn't bother arguing. She stormed out crying, and I stayed put, tired of hearing the same sob story. I never expected what happened next. The very next day, Jade accused me of something unimaginable, flipping my life upside down. Now, 3 years later, after staying silent, my family is bombarding my phone with messages as they discover she lied. I'll never forget the day everything unraveled. The morning after our fight, my parents woke me up, telling me my uncle and Jade were coming over urgently. I had no idea what was going on. When I got downstairs, Jade broke down, accusing me of assaulting her the night before. My uncle was furious and my parents looked horrified. She was too distressed to speak, or at least pretended to be. My uncle spoke on her behalf, claiming that after coming home from our house, she'd told him I'd forced myself on her because no one else was around. He couldn't even look at me, and my parents turned their eyes away as if I was already guilty. I was in shock, pleading my innocence, but no one would listen. They treated me like a monster. My parents begged my uncle not to involve the authorities, promising to do whatever it took to resolve the issue. All the while, I cried, completely ignored by everyone in the room as if I didn't exist. It was infuriating. Even though I'd done nothing wrong, they acted like I was the worst person imaginable. They were ignoring me and chatting to each other, so I grabbed up a vase and flung it at the wall in fury, hoping they would pay attention to me. But that backfired because my father lost his rage and grabbed me by the arm, pulled me to my room, and then locked me inside. I kept hammering on the door until my fists and arms hurt because I was not going to let Jade get away with it. It was a tremendous lie to tell, and it might have wrecked my reputation, but my father wouldn't allow me leave the room until my uncle and Jade departed. When he finally opened the door, I burst into tears. I tried to explain that I hadn't done anything wrong, but they told me that they had watched the security footage from the cameras outside our house and knew that Jade had come over the previous evening and run out crying. They decided to believe her a few minutes later, based on the manner she ran out weeping. They informed me that Jade had no need to lie about what had happened and that they were embarrassed of the boy they had raised. My mother was in tears and couldn't speak, but my father informed me that despite their difficulties, they were able to persuade my uncle and Jade that they would not pursue any legal action against me. However, this required them to make a pledge in exchange. and Jade and my uncle had insisted that I be taken far away so that she wouldn't have to see me and relive the awful event. So, after much consideration, my father decided to send me away to live with my great-uncle in Loa. He was the least liked family member due to his horrible attitude and rage issues, and my father knew I didn't like him at all, but that was the furthest away from my family, and my father informed me that this was the only option. So now I had to accept it. Not only were they planning to send me away, but they had also informed Jay that they were going to take the college fund that they had set up for me and give it all to her, just to keep things quiet. I attempted to object, but there was no way to communicate to them, and I soon gave up since I didn't see the point of anything anymore, especially when my own parents didn't seem to trust me. I was also able to deduce that Jade had most likely falsely accused me of such things in order to extract money from my parents, because her own father would never accept any kind of help, especially financial assistance, from anyone, including his own family. Anyway, Within a few days following that episode, I was packed and ready to leave, and my parents didn't even bother hugging me or saying goodbye. For the following few days, my parents claimed that I was not even at home and I was under house arrest, so I was unable to say farewell to any of my friends. They had stolen my phone and informed me that if I didn't go off the grid and essentially disappear from everyone's lives, they would take it with them and ruin my life. So I was forced to break ties with everyone from my past and leave all I knew. All because of a falsehood Jade said a few days after the incident. My great-uncle came to fetch me up, and I was sent to live with him in an exile of sorts. Since then, I have had no contact with anyone from my past, including my family and friends, and I have had to entirely begin my life. When I initially moved away with my great-uncle, it was tough for me to adjust since he was always teaching me throughout the day. Even though he had no idea why I had been ejected out. However, the fact that I had been ejected out was enough for him to hold it against me and continually taunt me about it. And as I previously stated, he had a bad attitude and temper issues, so I had to tread carefully around him. I knew my parents were sending him money every month, yet he still seemed to be doing me a big favor by letting me remain with him. I knew I wouldn't be able to live with him, and after a few weeks I realized there was no use in becoming upset about something that had already happened. My parents had cut me off, and I was barred from communicating with anyone from my prior life, so all I could do was make the best of it and start applying for employment. I couldn't attend college anyway. I knew this since, despite being admitted to my preferred college, I lacked the necessary funds and resources to go. So I started applying for jobs. After a few weeks of moping about and a handful of interviews, I was eventually able to secure a job as a warehouse worker. It didn't pay well, and I was dissatisfied because of how physically demanding the job was. But at least after I received my first paycheck, I was able to relocate out of my awful great-uncle's house. I was fortunate to have a handful of coworkers about my age who were also struggling financially. We became great friends, and the three of us agreed to share an apartment. So that's how I was able to move out of my great-uncle's house, and I didn't even bother telling him because I knew it would be a good riddance for him. After I moved away, I never heard from any of my family members again, for the last 3 years. I've been living with the same people with whom I shared my first apartment, and we've all been extremely fortunate because after working for a few months in the warehouse, all three of us decided to keep looking for better opportunities because we'd been physically exhausted for the previous 3 years. We changed jobs and saved money since all three of us want to go to college. They've also had their fair share of challenges, but that's irrelevant. I'm now working in sales and earning a nice living, and I've been considering reapplying to universities. My 2 buddies are also doing well, and we recently moved to a larger apartment in a much nicer neighborhood. Of course, now that things have begun to improve for me, my family believes it is the ideal time for me to try to reintegrate into my life. As I previously stated, I have had no communication with them in 3 years, so I was startled when my father contacted me via email a few days ago. I quote EM, not on any social media since it was one of the rules my parents made when they sent me out. And I've been really worried about them spreading the story and damaging my name and life if I broke the terms, so I kept to it. My email address hasn't changed in 3 years, and I've never banned them anywhere. Despite the fact that they have .anyway, I was startled to hear from them since, given all that had transpired, I had not expected it. When I received the email, it was simply an apology for everything that had transpired over the last 3 years, and he asked for my address and contact information so that he could properly reach out to me. He also gave me his personal contact information in case I wanted to call him on my own time. He was apologizing and reaching out to me in the first place because Jade had finally concluded it was time to tell everyone the truth about what had transpired. She was on her deathbed, and I suppose she had finally gotten a conscience or something, but for whatever reason, she chose to tell her father the truth about what had occurred. And he'd talked with my folks. So, after knowing the truth, my parents decided to contact me again. But let's get back to what occurred with Jade. She has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she is unlikely to survive. She has been suffering for 8 months, and her health is only getting worse, despite the fact that treatment is still underway. And no, she was unable to make good use of the money she took from my education fund after defrauding me. She squandered it all with poor life decisions since, rather than completing her master's degree, she chose to take a gap year and tour the world in order to broaden her horizons and genuinely discover herself. She returned around a year and a half ago, having already depleted more than half of her funds in order to live a luxury lifestyle. So by the time she returned, she had very little money and was asking my parents for more. But my uncle threatened to cut her off if she received any more money from my parents, so she had to abandon the notion of going to college since she couldn't afford a master's degree unless she worked. That quote not what she wanted. But she still had some money, which she might have put to good use and worked to increase her wealth. However, I believe your extended trip had made her indolent, and she was already rather spoiled. So she went on to spend even more of her money by purchasing an apartment and continuing to live above her means, despite the fact that she hadn't even begun searching for work. Finally, she was able to find work about a year ago, but she was diagnosed with cancer and had to stop. And now she has had to sell the apartment and everything else she had purchased because she needed the money, and I don't want to come across as callous. But after reading what happened to her, I felt terrific because she didn't need enemies, since she was her own worst enemy. After I finished reading the email, I had to decide whether or not to contact my parents again, and I opted to discuss it with my friends first. This also meant that I had to finally tell them the truth about why my parents had forced me out of the house, because I had previously just told them that we had had a lot of fights and that's why they had kicked me out. But I had not informed them the whole reason. However, after receiving that email, I finally shared it with my pals since I didn't have anybody else to talk to about it. I told them everything about Jade, even how she lied and threw me under the bus. Then I told them all about my parents and how they had trusted her over me. Not only had they booted me out and sent me to live with the worst relative conceivable, but they had also forced me to cut off all contact with my past and threatened to ruin my name if I went against them. My buddies couldn't believe what I was saying as I narrated everything to them. And once I was finished, they assured me that if they were in my shoes, they would never contact my parents again or forgive them. And I'm taking it seriously because it's coming from my closest friends, who are basically the only ones I have at this point. I wouldn't have given it much attention if they had just urged me not to contact my parents and to leave it go. But they believe I should come out about what happened to me since I've been living in dread for the past 3 years, despite the fact that I haven't done anything wrong. They are correct, to be honest. I have had to give up so much of my life because someone spread a falsehood about me, and my parents believed it. If I want to regain it, I must speak up about what happened to me. But first, I told my parents that I was going to stick to the tale and the truth about what occurred because people deserve to know. And I don't care if Jade is on her deathbed or whatever. She wrecked my life, but now I'm going to regain it. So I texted the phone my father had given me and informed him what I was going to do because I already had screenshots of the email he had sent me verifying that Jade was lying, so I could write about it on social media and then forget about it. I could finally use social media again. I wasn't asking for permission, but I think he misjudged the scenario. And now he, my mother, and even my uncle are blowing up my phone, pleading with me not to do this because Jade has already gone through a lot and is suffering like never before, so she has already received her karma, and I do not need to punish her anymore. They don't want me to reveal the truth because it would harm her reputation, and they believe that I may return to whatever I left behind without disclosing the true reason for my departure. Nobody is going to challenge it, and they're correct. That is something I cannot do, but I don't think I want to because Jade took away a significant portion of my life, and even my friends believe it's totally reasonable for me to share the truth. It isn't to get back at her. It's only so people know what occurred. And I don't believe there are many legitimate justifications for disappearing from everyone's lives for 3 years and then reappearing. Besides, I don't even plan on returning to the city. I'm pleased enough here, yet I miss my friends and many of my family who were kind to me. So I believe they deserve to know the truth. My mom and uncle have been continually blowing up my phone, which is the only thing keeping me from writing. Jade appears to be in bad shape, and they have nearly begged me not to say anything about it. So what if I went ahead and shared the truth about why I had to leave everything behind for 3 years, exposing my cousin, even if she is currently on her deathbed? I did it. I thought about it for a long time. I asked my pals again and again, and they all said the same thing. Jade and my family had robbed 3 years from my life that I might have spent normally, but I had to live in terror because of them, despite the fact that I had done nothing wrong. It would be totally reasonable for me to retaliate, regardless of Jade's situation. Many of the comments here believe the same thing. To be honest, at the end of the day, it was my decision, but knowing that the majority of people would support me made me feel much better. It's been a week since my first post, and last night I published a post detailing everything that has happened in my life and why I've been off the grid and out of everyone's lives for the past 3 years. Everyone who has known me in the past, including friends and relatives, has contacted me to let me know that they are there for me and have missed me terribly over the last 3 years. I honestly believe that since I had a lot of emails from individuals in the first few months, but reportedly after that, my parents urged everyone not to look for me because I wanted to be alone, because I have gone through something really traumatic and I require time and space to recover. So after the first several months of no contact, people stopped contacting me because they wanted to give me space. All of my pals informed me that they had questioned my parents numerous times about my location, but they had never divulged it, so they couldn't contact me. And several of my family informed me that they had been waiting patiently for me to resurface. It really made me weep a little, seeing how no one had forgotten me and how eager everyone was to welcome me back. Most significantly, several have stated that they had always thought Jade was shady, but learning this was below her standards. My dad and uncle have said nothing thus far, and I'm hoping they stay away since I don't want to communicate with them. As for myself, I feel a lot more free and light now that everything is off my chest. So coming up about what happened to me was a fantastic decision, and I don't regret anything. Hello? Update number 2. It's been a few days since I made that post, and my parents contacted me yesterday to express their disappointment in me, because they had only asked that I let sleeping dogs lie and come up with some excuse for why I was missing for 3 years while not telling everyone the truth. Jade deserves some peace and quiet, considering her situation. Apparently, since my post, she has lost almost all of her friends, and no one in her family is willing to talk with her anymore, as if it is my responsibility. It was stunning that they still care more about what Jade is going through than what their own kid has gone through in the past. An apology would never suffice. And I informed them that I no longer cared about their unhappiness. They had also let me down on several levels, and they now had no reason to anticipate anything from me. If Jade deserves some peace and quiet right now just because she is suffering with cancer, I could say the same thing about myself, since when they booted me out and put me to live with my awful great uncle, I was just 1-8. They had no pity or mercy for me. At least I'm telling the truth. Jade lied, and she got away with it for 3 years. So I'm reclaiming my life, and I'm not going to let anyone attempt to make me feel bad about it. I advised them not to approach me again and that they should only be disappointed in themselves. Then I blocked them. Something I should have done a long time ago. But I was afraid and bewildered. However, I believe that speaking out about what occurred to me has provided me with a feeling of closure, and I no longer feel pressured to deal with my parents. I don't give a damn about them or their expectations. Hey. So I decided to come see my friends and family after 3 years this weekend, and it was perhaps the finest choice I've ever made. I also brought my housemates along for moral support more than anything else. And to be honest, they have become so close that we are now like brothers, and I wanted them to meet my friends as well. Everyone has been getting along well, and my pals seem pleased to see me. I'm really living with one of them right now since everyone was insulted when I stated I was going to stay in a hotel. I'm going back in a few days, but my heart is so full of delight that I can't put it into words. My housemates and old friends are living together in one of my friends' houses, and we're having a great time. I've also met a number of my relatives who have informed me that they have severed ties with my dad, uncle, and Jade, and do not intend to do so again. And that makes me very glad that, at the end of the day, people will always stand up for what they believe is right. I'm delighted I'm surrounded by individuals who haven't forgotten me and love me more than my parents.